Thank you for checking out Real Talk Personal Finance. Shit's about to get real. Cash Flow King with you today. And in today's episode, we have the 2024 year-end review and the 2024 Real Talk Personal Finance Guest of the Year winner. As always, thank you very much for tuning into the show. We really appreciate it. I don't expect this episode is going to be very long. I have some stats that I'm going to go through with everybody, a little reflection on the year, and then some important announcements at the end, along with the announcement of the winner for Guest of the Year. So first, I was very surprised. I got an email from Buzzsprout, which, as many of you know, is the hosting service that we use here at the Real Talk Personal Finance podcast. And similar to a lot of the music emails from the different services you might get, for example, I think Spotify does one. I believe YouTube Music might do one. Pandora probably does one. It's kind of like your most listened to songs of the year, and click here for a mix of your most frequently listened to songs and things like that. Kind of some cool, fun, interesting stats. And so Buzzsprout did something similar, and they said the 2024 podcast recap for Real Talk Personal Finance's podcast. Check out your 2024 backtrack. So I clicked on that and went through and jotted down some different stats for you guys that I thought might be interesting to share with all the listeners. The first one, and I was very surprised by this, I don't know how, but Real Talk Personal Finance is in the top 50% of podcasts on Buzzsprouts in terms of downloads. And as I've mentioned before, when doing different episodes on the show, due to the fact that I work in the industry and I'm doing this anonymously, I really can't promote the show like I would want to through different social media channels and stuff like that. It's pretty much a word of mouth type of show. So we always ask, if you enjoy it, to share it with your friends, family members, coworkers, whomever. And that's kind of how we grow the show. So it's nowhere near, the top of the top necessarily. However, I was very surprised when I clicked on the link that we are considered in the top 50% of all Buzzsprout podcasts. I think there's another statistic out there. It wasn't in this recap email, but I believe it's somewhere in the single digits. I can't remember the exact number, but most podcasts basically do several episodes in the beginning, and then they pretty much drop off and fall off the face of the planet. This is, I believe, the third year in a row that we've had the show. We started, I want to say it was back in January of 2022, where we got things off the ground, and then we had the show in 2023 and again this year in 2024. And so I was surprised that we were in the top 50%. We're not all that far away from the top 25% based on average downloads in the first 7 days, but even still, we could have a lot more listenership than we do. And while we appreciate everybody that listens to the show, we would also appreciate it if you would share the show with some others and kind of help us grow organically that way. The next thing I wanted to talk about were the top 5 episodes of 2024 based on listener downloads. I think I gave a spoiler alert to this in one of the most recent episodes, and this portion did not change. The number one show from number 1 to 5 in terms of top episode downloads for 2024 was Secrets of Overemployed featuring Cashflow Rockefeller Prince. That was number 1. The second most popular show was Cost to Raise a Child in the USA is up about 20%. Number 3 was Buying a Turnkey Rental in 2024. Number 4 was The Cashflow King on the Millionaires Unveiled podcast. And then number 5 was What's in Your HSA. So those were the top 5 shows of 2024 based on listener downloads. For anyone that's been listening to the show for a while, we really do a combination of different types of topics on the show. My intention for the most part in general is to make the content evergreen in the sense that you can come back to it and it's pretty much almost always going to continue to be relevant. If we're talking about limits on different account types and things like that for a particular year, generally those are indexed for inflation, so those might change over time, but the meat and potatoes of the show and the overall substance of the show is generally, going to continue to be relevant even years into the future. With that said, we all have, a tendency to have recency bias, and we're typically listening. I know when I do as a podcast listener, we're listening to the most recent shows that have come out from our favorite podcasts. And so, those were the ones that came up. What's in your HSA? I don't remember the exact date on that one. That was a little bit further back, but that was number 5 there. So wanted to share that with you guys. In terms of different countries listening to the show, as we've mentioned several times, we are a U.S.-based show, so it's no surprise that the top country listening to this podcast is the USA. Number 2 was Canada. Number 3, Australia. Number 4, I still don't know if I'm going to pronounce this correctly, but I believe it's Tanzania. I think I said Tanzania originally. And number 5, Mexico, which is a relatively new country for us. So USA, Canada, Australia, Tanzania, or Tanzania, depending on, I don't know what the fucking correct pronunciation of that shit is. No disrespect, I just can't pronounce it. And number 5 was Mexico. So top 5 listening countries to the Real Talk Personal Finance podcast in 2024. Within the United States, we also had the top 5 U.S. listening cities. From number 1 through 5, we have Lexington, Kentucky, Chicago, Illinois, Indianapolis, Indiana, New York, New York, and Houston, Texas. So thank you very much to everybody for tuning into the show and making 2024 a successful year. We've published, according to Buzzsprout, 67 episodes in 2024, which comes out to an average of about 1.29 episodes per week. Now, some of those are going to be short and sweet, like the past few have been. Some of those are going to be premium episodes, only available to our premium subscriber base. And some of those are going to be, most of those are going to be general shows that we do that are accessible to everybody. Different shows out there. This kind of stems into my next bullet point here about a recent, actually Buzzsprout has their own podcast, believe it or not, that I listened to, and they brought up a point that really resonated with me, and I've been thinking long and hard about this over the holidays, and that is regarding burnout and having fun with your podcast. When I first started the show back in 2022, I didn't have a certain set frequency or cadence that we did the show. It was pretty much whenever the fuck I feel like it. We didn't have a premium membership. It was just for fun. It still kind of is just for fun, but it was when I felt like there was something worthy of posting or dropping an episode on, that's what I did. And there really wasn't a hard and fast set publishing schedule or frequency or set of commitments and whatnot. And I've talked to different people about this, and I've thought about this myself as, a podcast listener of other shows. And it seems like having a consistent publishing schedule and consistent day or days of the week that shows are launched, people look forward to that. I know that, for example, on Mondays, which is normally when this show drops, I have several podcasts that I look forward to, many of which drop once a week on Mondays. There's other shows I listen to that might drop once a week on different days of the week. And yet there's still others that might be more or less frequent than that. And when I was thinking about the whole burnout thing, I kind of felt like and reflected back on this year in 2024, and quite frankly, I'm feeling a little bit burnt out at the moment. And I've realized a few things. Number one, for most people, life is busy, right? No matter what you have going on. Could be family commitments, could be work commitments, could be personal stuff, could be whatever the case is. Everybody has their own shit that they have going on. And while some people may look forward to a certain set schedule and certain set, episodes to drop, every Monday, for example, I think the vast majority of folks, even based on interactions that I've had, aren't necessarily keeping up with the show on a weekly basis. For example, I've had people write in, and I've talked to people that I know that are like, hey, I just listened to your show on fill in the blank. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay, cool. Hope you liked it. But that was 2 or 3 weeks ago. Did you listen to this week's fucking episode? And I didn't say that, but I was thinking that. And so I feel like I'm putting a lot of undue and unnecessary pressure on myself to continue to have a weekly publishing schedule. And I know for those that podcast for a living or are making gobs and gobs of money off of it, that's definitely not this show. Maybe that's something that they need to do to continue to grow the show and have their show listed, on a certain list and, the rankings and the algorithms and all the bullshit. But quite frankly, that's really not, I'd love to grow the show, as I mentioned. I want to grow the show, but I don't want to do it and feel like I'm getting burnt out at the same time. When I first started this podcast, as I mentioned before, it was a way for me to vent, a way for me to have a little fun, talk in a way that I really can't talk at work, right? So I'm not exactly the most professional on this show. That's intentional. That's part of the brand. We like to cut up. We like to have fun. We drop some curse words from time to time. It's an explicit show. If you're listening, Lisa Foxy, shout out to you. Thanks again for the 3 stars, wrecking our perfect rating. But seriously, it's something that I feel like I've gotten away from that. And quite frankly, just being perfectly blunt and transparent with everybody, I thought about shutting the show down at the end of 2024 and having Real Talk Personal Finance be a thing of the past. And then I thought, if I do that, there's going to be something that I want to talk about that comes up, and I'm no longer going to have a platform to do that. There's going to be some listeners out there that really enjoy the show. Maybe they don't listen every week. Maybe they do listen every week religiously. I don't know, right? But that's going to disappoint some people. And I thought back, again, to me being a podcast listener, there was a show, they haven't published anything probably in years. I'm still subscribed to them and follow them on my podcast player. I believe it was called Countdown to Financial Independence. And these were just ordinary people that launched a show that liked to cut up and liked to talk about financial independence. And the guy on there would crack me up. He'd have a potty mouth, kind of like I do sometimes. It was an explicitly rated show, which was interesting in and of itself. And he would talk about things like, I saw this fucking truck at the light. I'm thinking, how much money do you have put away in investments? What's your truck payment? And he would just say some funny shit that would crack me up. And I enjoyed listening to that podcast. But that podcast also was not on a consistent publishing schedule. In fact, they would drop shows pretty much whenever the hell they wanted to. And sometimes you'd have a couple pop up pretty close to each other. And other times you could go weeks without one. I think at one point they basically announced that they were shutting it down. And then all of a sudden I stayed subscribed to it and an episode had popped up several months later and they threw a couple episodes out and then they kind of went dark again. I don't plan on doing that. I don't think I'm going to shut the show down after further consideration and talking to a few people. I think it's something that I do enjoy. I just don't think I'm doing it in the way that brings me fulfillment and enjoyment like I used to. And that's something that I want to get back to. And so with all that said, we will have a Real Talk Personal Finance podcast still in 2025. We will continue to publish whenever the fuck we feel like it, pretty much. For the premium folks out there, we are still going to honor our quarterly e-newsletter, although it's probably going to be late again. I actually texted Cube earlier today. We are still going to do our premium episodes for the quarterly e-newsletter recap. We're still going to do all that stuff. But as far as dropping a new episode every single Monday, I just don't want to tie myself to that kind of a commitment anymore. And so I'm going to be stepping away from doing it at that frequency. So for those of you that have been listening religiously and consistently on Mondays, again, we appreciate it. I'm sure you listen to other shows. I hope you can use the time to catch up on some of those other shows. I know for me, it's almost like having a to-do list. And anybody that knows me knows I really don't like having a to-do list. I like having a done list, as I like to say. And so it's like a constant struggle and battle for me sometimes just to get through all the fucking podcasts that I have in my queue. And it's like crossing it off. And once you get through so many of them, all of a sudden you have new ones that are popping up again. Some of them are long, some of them are short, but it just feels like this unending task. And so what I'd like to do is not be that checkbox on somebody else's to-do list where they're like, fuck, there's another episode. I don't want to get behind. Now I have to go ahead and listen to this, right now and get this out of the way. I don't want to do that. What I do want to do is continue to have the show and have it in a meaningful way and get back to not feeling any sort of pressure that I have to publish at a certain frequency, getting back to doing it whenever I feel like it, getting back to doing it and enjoying it, not being like, oh shit, it's Sunday, I don't have a podcast episode to drop tomorrow. Tomorrow's Monday, we're supposed to put out a show. Let me throw something together. That's not the intention of the show. And I've said this probably a couple years ago when I first started the show. Part of my reasoning for not doing a consistent set schedule is we don't want to put out content and episodes just to put out content and episodes that are dog shit. Not everyone's going to be a home run. Not everyone's going to be the best episode you've ever heard. But when we put stuff out, we want it to have impact. We want it to be good, quality content. That's the goal. So with all that said, I can't tell you definitively exactly what the publishing schedule is going to be for 2025 because we don't have one. My plan, tentatively, is to likely have content at a minimum, probably on a monthly basis, possibly more often than that. There could be a month where we drop several episodes because there's a lot going on, we have a lot to say, and it's just that particular time of year. Okay, great. But there also might be a time period where a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks goes by and you don't hear anything. We're still here, but again, we're just going to put shit out when we want to put shit out when we feel like there's things that are worthy of making episodes about. And I don't want to, again, commit to a weekly publishing schedule. 1.29 episodes a week or 67 episodes published in 2024. It's great on the one hand, but on the other hand, it's too much. And I had to try to find a happy medium between, okay, I'm getting burnt out. Where's the fun? How do I really feel about this? And just the fact that I had the thought of shutting it down because of that weekly commitment tells me that I need to take a step back. So we're not shutting it down. We're not going away forever or anything like that. We are just probably going to reduce the frequency with which we put out shows. And with that said, when we do put out shows, the goal, as always, is to have quality content for you guys. So there's a lot going on. If you've listened to the show for any length of time, we have a little one. It's a whole thing in and of itself. I'm working on a new supplemental professional designation in 2025. That's going to take up some time. Work has been pretty busy. That obviously takes up some time. So there's a lot of, just like all of us in life have shit going on. And we're stretched in so many different directions. And so the podcast is very important to me, and I want to keep it. I want to hold on to it. I want to still have it. I just don't want it to be a fucking chore. And that's what I feel like it is sometimes right now. Not always, but sometimes. And so with all that said, we will publish episodes at random. So please feel free to continue to follow and subscribe to the show. You're not going to know when the episode comes out. All of a sudden, you're going to see a little microphone pop up that says, hey, Real Talk Personal Finance Podcast dropped an episode. And we hope that you listen, and we hope that you stay with us. But again, we just don't want to create that unnecessary and, quite frankly, stressful, I have to do this, it has to be every week. Just not going to do it. So I hope everybody understands that. I hope everybody can respect that. I hope everybody, continues to listen to and support the show. As I've said ad nauseum now in pretty much every episode, we really do appreciate everybody that listens. But it is time to, at least right now, take a step back in frequency and not commit to the weekly publishing schedule. So once you're done crying, grab your Kleenex. No, I'm kidding. But hopefully, again, everybody understands that, and that doesn't, that doesn't stop you from wanting to listen to the show. That's what we need to do, and that's the decision that I've made in the 2024, reflection that I had about what's going on in life and goals and the podcast and all that kind of stuff. So that's where we are with that. With that said, the goal is still to continue to produce great content, continue to have guests and repeated guests, continue to just deliver some funny stuff that's educational, obviously not advice, but educational in nature, have a couple laughs with us, and kind of go from there. So with all that said, and without further ado, let's get into the 2024 Real Talk Personal Finance guest winner. This was a close one. We had a multi-way tie. I think we had a 4-way tie at one point, And we might have a couple other votes that come in because it was pretty close. It was neck and neck on a few folks. But the winner in 2024 for Guest of the Year is Credit Union Cowboy. Congratulations to Credit Union Cowboy for being the 2024 Real Talk Personal Finance Guest of the Year. We appreciate you. We appreciate all of our guests. Rent Reverend did not get a single vote this year. He was the winner for last year, so that was kind of disappointing to see that. We had several others that got some votes. There was one other guest that didn't get any votes. I'm not going to say who that is, but I like to tease Rent Reverend because he won last year. So anyhow, thanks again for listening to the show. I hope everybody had a very happy holiday season. Happy New Year to everybody. Hopefully we can all have a very successful and prosperous 2025 going forward. If you have any ideas that you'd like to see on the show, again, no promises. I know I still haven't done the fucking movie thing. I don't know if I'm going to do it or not, but, Big Brother K, we heard you, and we appreciate you writing in. It still could happen, but buddy, I got no time to watch movies anymore. But anyway, if you have any show ideas and something you want to hear about or see on the podcast, feel free to email the show, realtalkpersonalfinance@gmail.com. Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for understanding on the change in frequency. And make sure you follow the show, and you will be surprised when we drop our mystery episodes, because you don't know when they're coming in 2025. For the Real Talk Personal Finance Podcast, this is the Cash Flow King signing off. Happy New Year.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.